Go ahead.
Sure. My name is Phyllis Harris, as you said, and I'm a professor, but I'm also a writer. I've written 14 books, and my latest book
Mm.
is called The Curse of the Blumenthals. Most of my other books have been writing stories about other people. For instance, Whitey Bulger, the head of the South Boston Irish Mob, or Lou Gossett Jr., who won an Academy Award. Various other people whose stories I've written. But after so many years of doing this, I felt it was time to write my own story.
Mm.
So my own story, which actually takes place a great deal in Providence, which if you went to Rhode Island, then you know URI, then you certainly know the area that I'm talking about. But this story, which is called Curse of the Blumenthals, is my family story, a family that grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, and two particular tragedies that happened to the story, to the family in the story.
You know, you write a wonderful story. It's a wonderful book, Blumenthals. Real quick, I mean, we don't get into it too deep because I'm not a political guy on the show. But what do you think, real quickly, about the immigration thing going on in our country right now, and your thoughts about that? Go ahead.
Oh goodness, I don't even want you to stop me on that. You're never going to get me off that subject. I'm just, especially as a journalist, I'm so upset about stories, AI, untruth, stories that really can't be, they're fabricated, they really can't be identified. And that bothers me more than anything, because if we don't have free journalism and we aren't free to tell our stories as we want it, we're in big trouble. Yeah. So that's pretty much my opinion at the moment.
Outstanding. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, on the show, I don't talk politics and don't talk religion, but it's powerful. It's a tough times right now. And so thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Okay. So what's some of the initial challenges that your book faced when they immigrated into the United States? So kind of bring us back to then when your family came over. What were some of your challenges in a way that maybe is the same right now?
Yeah, well, they were immigrants. They didn't know the country. They didn't know the language. They were struggling to put a roof over their own heads, to raise money for their family. And I don't know that things are all that different right now than they were then. They came from Eastern Europe, and they settled in Providence, Rhode Island. My grandparents raised 9 children in Providence, Rhode Island, and they did the very best that they could as new immigrants who honestly didn't know the country or speak the language, which I find so admirable, to think that you could come to a strange place and settle with your family and hopefully find other people that you knew that were there. Maybe you could find a relative or someone who came from your area. And that certainly was a huge help. But necessary to learn the language and to try to do the best you can to get jobs. My grandfather was a tailor. My grandmother obviously was a mother who raised 9 children, and only 8 of which survived.
Wow, that's wonderful. Now, was that the highlight, a specific moment where it was powerful to you, or were there other moments where you can kind of share with us that your parents went through to get, make things go well? Because I know that was a tremendous thing there. Is there any others?
Well, I can tell you that they were bootleggers. They broke the law. That's how they did. That's how they made money.
Yeah.
And they got their bootlegging, set up around, and one uncle after another uncle after another uncle. And sometimes they broke the law, and sometimes they were arrested, and sometimes they made money. But that's what they did. And there's no, is there shame in it? Of course. Yeah. But they, this was what they did, and there's no sense in lying. If you're going to tell a family story, you got to tell the warts and everything. You just can't tell the good parts. And this was a family that certainly did the best they could, but they were met with terrible tragedies, and that's why I call it the curse of the Blumenthals, because there was a curse and 2 terrible tragedies that befell them.
When you told I'm not sure how many family members are out there about who read your book, but had you getting the research, putting things together, was there any family that had a little backlash and said, "No, don't publish it, don't say anything, we're still embarrassed"? Was there any of that?
Of course there was. Of course there was. We wanted to glorify everything. We did the best we could. But there was a horrific automobile crash that involved 6 members of my family in 1936. And they had come from Providence, Rhode Island to visit an uncle who was in a hospital in Connecticut. And on the way back, this car with 6 Blumenthals in it was hit by a drunk driver who survived, but all 6 of my relatives died, including 3 children under the age of 12. So that was almost like the defining moment in the family. How could you recover from this? How could you simply turn around and live your lives when you've lost 6 members in such a cruel and hideous way? And at that time, there was a great deal of anti-Semitism, and these were 6 Jews, so there wasn't the publicity or the concern of them that they might have been had they not been. Jewish,
Yeah.
and the driver of the car was not Jewish. Perhaps he received a very light sentence, and there was honestly more sympathy for him than there was for these relatives. And I wanted to research this. I wanted to find out who the driver was. Where did the accident happen exactly? Where were they going? Where were they going? Where were they coming from? And so that was trying to find information from 1936. It was a little difficult because the newspapers that published stories about them were no longer in existence. Editors who had written the stories were no longer around, but it was worth it because I really found out things that I had no knowledge about before. And while my family members were frightened that I was going to unveil things, for them it was almost a relief. Now we knew who did this horrible thing, who was the driver of that car, where was it exactly on the highway, who witnessed it, were there other people that spoke about it. And it was sad and horrible, but in a way it was a joy just to be able to find out the truth. And that was what I set out to do.
Beautiful. Our special guest today is Professor Phllis Karras. She's an author. She's a journalism instructor at Boston University. I love that. At this time, ma'am, tell us where we go after the show to learn more about you, your story, get one of your books. Where do we go? What website, what platform that we can get your books?
Well, it's easiest to just go to Amazon.com, which is where pretty much people go to everything these days to find, or my website, which is www.phylliskarras.com. The book is available in bookstores. It's available on Amazon.com, and it's being released actually on May 19th. But Amazon is taking orders for copies right now, and I'm excited to share the story. It's not, it's called The Curse for a reason. It's not a happy, joyous story, but I do believe at the end that there is some redemption, some feeling that if the family stays together and loves one another and supports one another, then they can get through these things. Because while I talked about the accident as being a tremendously defining incident, there was another incident that also defined the family. My mother always referred to the accident and things that happened before 1936 and after 1936. And of course, I wasn't alive then. But 9 months later, after the accident, another horrible thing happened to our family. And this time, we were not victims. We were the oppressors. An 18-year-old cousin of mine committed a hideous murder in Brookline, Massachusetts. So the newspapers were not full of stories mourning 6 Blumenthals. There was one Blumenthal who was now the face of a murderer, and that was all over the newspapers. And that was quite a thing for the family to swallow and to get through.
Beautiful. Your story is outstanding. Have you thought about in this day and age putting it in a TV format or something like that? I think it's going to be a great visual as well, too.
Well, thank you so much. My agent is working on that right now.
Perfect.
Perhaps a 7-episode series, but it's hard today. Everything is very difficult with all the streaming, but they feel it has the elements. It has a lot of power. It has a lot of pain, but there's also a lot of love because this is a very strong family. Blumenthals were strong and courageous, and they stayed together. My mother had always said, when you lose 6 members of your family in a horrible car accident, you're not going to lose any more. So one of my cousins did commit a horrible murder. For the 13 years that he was in prison, we were with him. Every single visit was filled with a family member. And, was that easy? No, it wasn't easy burying 6 people, and it wasn't easy going into a prison to visit an 18-year-old cousin. And there was always the mystery, Alice, of did he really commit this murder or did someone else do it? So all these elements combined leave me with a lot of questions. I found a lot of answers, but I still have questions.
Great story. You're a professor in journalism at a school, at the university. How kind of share with us how you as a professor, real busy, doing things for these kids, stuff like that, how did you set time aside to write your many books and great books? How did you do that? Let's give us a tip.
Such a great question. And I must admit, I retired almost 3 years ago, but I always still have the title, whether I want it or not, of professor of journalism. And I was very fortunate because I was able to have my classes usually just on 2 days. So I'd go into the university, teach for 2 days, and then, of course, come home with piles of papers that I needed to go over. But there was still time. And reading other people's work often inspired me as well to write my own. So many of the other professors at the university were authors. So you're kind of in an environment where everybody's either reading or writing. Yeah. So it wasn't that difficult. And when you want to write, you're going to find the time. Even if you have 3 children at home and no time, you'll find it. You'll give up sleeping. It's there. If you want to write, you will write. Period. I really believe that.
Outstanding. Okay, one of the comments I made was community connection plays a crucial role in success of immigrant families. So very family oriented. They kind of hung together, stayed together. That's perfect. What other things we can take away from your growing up in community and family and toughness and togetherness?